just saw something from my good friend John Garcia, and I want you guys to notice something, right? I believe in free enterprise. I want the pizza shop, the grocery store, all these things to be privately owned, if that's the case, right? You can sell, you can charge prices based on competition, etc. I believe in that. I believe that profit margin for that person who works hard. I believe in all of that. But I also believe that we can't have a certain sector of this economy that can do what the oil companies are doing and some parts of the food companies are doing. They are simply raising prices because they can, and they know that we got some extra cash from the government during the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So they can, because they know people have the money. So instead of these people being able to save the extra or get something better with the extra, these people are just taking their money away. To my good friend, John Garcia, he's from Venezuela. And I hope you guys realize that we are able to have conversations, complete disagreement. Eventually, I think John is going to agree with me someday. But, we can disagree and keep talking about it until we can actually say, well, I see what you're saying. Well, John Garcia says something that is important, very important, because it shows that he listened to what I said. And I want to address what John Garcia said. That's my buddy. This is what he said, all right? He said, he said, energy, food, communications, nationalization. Call those strategic goods and services. That's exactly what Chavez did. The results are evident. Let me tell you what happened, okay? There are two things that happened. And what happened is you have to look at this through non-American eyes. Because what America does, right? Venezuela is a very rich country. They're full of oil and they have a lot of gold and other minerals. So there's a rich country. But the people are very poor. And the reason why are the people in Venezuela who runs everything. And Brother Garcia, he's a good guy. I know him personally. He's a good guy. But there are certain things that I don't think my brother sees because he was of the class that had, right? What very few people see is that America has had its tentacles in Venezuela. And corporations were taking the lead of America. Let me give an example. If we nationalize certain food industries, right? The ones that are critical, as John Garcia perfectly says, and the oil sector and these other sectors, what you start to get from the private sector, as opposed to saying, let's see how we can reconfigure ourselves into a bifurcated economy, something that we need to do in the United States as well. How can we reconfigure ourselves into a bifurcated economy so that those items that people need that don't need to be profit-based, gasoline and all of that, because we all need it, and then we have the rest of the economy that is laissez-faire, right? If I want to sell motorbikes, I sell it. I do what I need to do, and it's profit-based, competition-based. That would be fine. But that's not what happened in Venezuela. We got the full-on sabotage, not only by the United States against Venezuela, but by the corporate elite in Venezuela who created shortages, right? Okay, government, you want to take care of these criticals? Good. We're going to stop being efficient. We're going to stop doing X, Y, and Z. So they created a shortage. It's just like what we do in America, right? What did they do in order to try to justify high prices? They shut down refineries at all the wrong time. It's all what the private sector does to maximize their monies. There are answers. We just don't follow them. I saw some comments that, let's see, the one that stands out, I think, is still Garcia. Because Garcia says that, that the plutocracy is now controlled by those guys who own the companies, meaning the socialists who own the companies, et cetera, et cetera. And I always ask the same question, right? For a economic system that is predicated on ripping people off to succeed, it has to find a negative in any other type of system, whatever you call it, whether you call it socialist, bifurcated. I call mine a bifurcated economy, right? You have to find a reason. But I ask you a simple question. What makes you believe that a company run by government executives has any less of waste or efficiencies than one run by private corporate guys? There's only one difference. There is another layer of taking, right? In other words, shareholders have to get paid, profits have to be made, executives get their bonuses. If you run by the government, you may have bonuses, etc., but you don't have this stuff called stocks, which have to pay to dividends and whatever to these shareholders. So even if you are a tad bit more inefficient than the private sector, you're ahead. But you generally are not, because again, the private sector have this semblance of efficiency. But it's not true. If you take a look at every time we have the private sector take over public transportation, it costs more. Medicare run by private corporations called Medicare Advantage, it costs 20% more. I mean, every time we can do a direct comparison between a service government provides and a service that governments relegates to the private sector to provide, it always turns out that government is less expensive and more efficient than the private sector. And that goes without saying. If you have to pay a dividend, if you have to pay all these things, that profit then becomes an expense to the system. It's a lie that we have been indoctrinated with that we have to get out of our system. Every country in Europe that has tried privatizing the rails or the buses or whatever, they ended up paying more, getting less. Because remember, corporations are there to maximize the profit of the shareholders, while when run by government, there's one exception to the rule. And let me give you that exception. If I only have part-time services that I need, let me give an example. Let's say in the Northeast where we have to clean the roads of ice, right? We're cleaning the roads of ice. It doesn't make sense for us to populate all ourselves with all these trucks and all of that when you have individuals that can, for the winter season, private companies go ahead and they clean up the streets. Individual private companies clean up the streets. And then in the summer when we don't need them, they go do something else for somebody else. That is more efficient in the long run for the government to use the private sector to do that. But when it comes to things like healthcare, gasoline and all of that, it will always cost more to have the private sector do it. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.